Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This is another episode of GM's Corner, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, 2026 is my year of experiments, so I am trying something new on this video once again. It is a kind of GM-focused video, but unlike my previous GM's Corner where I just talk to camera, I'm doing something a little bit different on this one. I have a fellow YouTuber who's going to join me in a second. At BrambleBearDM is going to jump on, and Bramble is on my Discord, and occasionally we chat. He mentioned that he had some questions for me, GM-related questions, so I thought, why don't we sort of package those questions up, make it kind of sort of theme it a little bit. And the theme for this week's video is all around session prep. So Bramble's prepared some questions, and we're going to do a Discord call. We're going to record it, and we're going to edit it to cut some of the fat out of it and give you some of the best parts. And hopefully that will work. Anyway, this is just me experimenting with formats. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below. If this isn't a format that works for you, I also would like to hear that. So always looking for feedback and always appreciate the engagement. Thanks, everybody. And that's all I got. Let's get into it.
All right. So where do you want me to begin? Because session prep has been like the big thing I've wanted to ask you for a long time now, because you seem to have this master plan whenever it comes to the campaigns and stuff. The way you did War of the Crown specifically, it's like you knew just from reading everything ahead of time. I've been taught to read the last module first and then go backwards like that. But with you, it feels like you read it like a novella and wanted it to play out similarly. How did preparation like figure into that? Like, what is your method of session prep?
So interestingly, as we record this, I have a video that you haven't seen yet that will be hitting the channel, which is about not session prep. So this is a good kind of follow-up for that. But it's about, I think you might have seen this on the Discord. It's about how to prepare a full adventure from one of the Paizo published adventure paths. So I talk about my process there. And there, I mean, it's obviously very different preparing an individual session and preparing the whole adventure, or the kind of the skeleton of the whole story. And one thing I say in that video is that when I pick up one of the Paizo pre-published modules, I do read it like it's a novel. I just read it from beginning to end, right? And I let the whole story like play out in my head, possible permutations of the story. And I also typically will go with like some sticky notes. And I like to buy physical books. I like to buy physical books. I like them by my bedside table. And then, at night I'll read through the adventure, and I'll have a little pencil by my bedside table and some sticky notes. And if there are things that I've like, oh, here's a neat observation that I want to come back to, I'll literally just stick it in the book. And if you do digital, you can do this obviously by putting notes in a PDF or whatever. You can do the same thing. But I do read the books cover to cover to get an understanding of the overall story. But as you know, I diverge pretty substantially from the story.
Oh, yes.
So
I was just about to say that. It's like one of the things that I like about your GMing style is that you are not afraid to change something you don't like.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is my heritage as a obviously the last 10 years, I would say, I've mostly run Pathfinder. I've mostly run stuff for modules. But when I was younger and I had more time, I did a lot of just like, homebrew, just, made up settings, made up stories, especially through college. I really sort of delighted in surprising my players with like innovative locations and worlds, and even in you'll note, even in War for the Crown, when we did the extra planar stuff, you got a little slice of like Mythkeeper's, like storytelling when they went to Leng, because all
Mhm.
that obviously was completely made up and had nothing.
Oh,
There was
yes.
no Leng anywhere in the original AP. So
And there's
that
no
was
Hao
just
Jin either.
there was no Hao Jin either. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
yeah.
completely like original idea as well. So yeah, so I read the books cover to cover, but then when it comes to individual session prep, I think that just varies based on like what I think is coming. Um, what's your kind of general process when you
Oh.
prep for a session?
So the way that I do things is the mood of the players and the tone that they have selected for the campaign, like I did with Bloodlords. I'll use that as an example. We wanted it to be evil, but not cringe evil. So I had to
Yeah,
plan things around it such that we didn't diminish the environment or the setting, but also allowed them to do some, like some fun things. It couldn't just
yeah,
all be doom and gloom. So, in terms of session prep, it was mostly going through the module and making certain that every time that we got to broadcast and every time we got to play, I gave them an opportunity to either diverge or indulge in what they were doing. Particularly with Berlin, because Berlin is pretty damn scary when she wants to
yeah.
be.
I think well, it's one of those things where it's sort of how you play it, right? Obviously, my Berlin was not super scary. I think she was cheerful and kind of preppy and like a little fun. And part of the reason for that is because I was doing this carryover thing from War for the Crown.
Mm-mm.
I had Nenarine, and I needed to differentiate Berlin and Nenarine. Nenarine being slightly the more,
Psychotic.
um, yeah, determined. She is the more determined character, and so I thought Berlin as sort of juxtaposition, it would be good if she had a bit of a sense of whimsy. But yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. So I basically do the same thing at the beginning of my Bloodlords game. I spoke to my players. I think you know this. We did the vote on the channel, and
Mhm.
we said we wanted an AP set in Garand. I knew I wanted a six-parter, so that basically just meant um, it gave me two options essentially. It was Strength of Thousands or Bloodlords. I think were the two that I was looking at, and they both had pros and cons.
Mhm.
So the other thing is, I didn't make the decision myself. I went to my players and I was like, "What would you rather play?" And they were like, "I like the politics of Bloodlords, but I don't want to play evil." And they also said, I also said we could do politics and strength of thousands. I think, there is a lot of politics around a school and like,
Oh yeah.
sort of faculty members or, but the feedback I got from my players is we're all old. And it's very hard to harken our brains back to that childhood era. And so it's more of a stretch for us to play students. And I know that in the middle of Strength of Thousands or thereabouts, you become a professor. But those were the kinds of discussions that I was having with my players.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I said, I can run Bloodlords and not have you guys be evil at all. And they were like, really? And I was like, yeah. I know that the talk on the internet is that it's an evil campaign, but the truth is, like, you can there's a lot of ways, a lot of tones that you can use when running Bloodlord.
Oh yes.
And I think the minute that I unlocked that possibility for them, they were like, "Oh, let's do it. Let's approach this from a different angle." So most of my players ended up not being from Geb. They were outsiders. They had various reasons to come to Geb, and then they were all they have like a normal morality, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the best way to describe it. They have a normal morality in a country that's amoral.
I think the best way that you portrayed that was with the Lich of Jalmarang Island. Like
Yeah.
that seemed more custodian, not quite evil, but the moment that Pharasma was present, it's just like get the fuck off this boat.
Obviously, because they were all coming. So just to transition this into kind of your original question,
Mhm.
which is, I start by reading the book cover to cover, but then the minute that I hear from my players what they want to do, then I take a left turn and I figure out how can my story support that. So I knew they were all going to be newcomers to Geb, And so looks like we had another gala. No. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna start it in Geb. I'm gonna start it outside of Geb. And the journey of getting to Geb, I'm gonna sound like such a nerd here. I wanted to feel like Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I just wanted it to be
Oh,
like, you start in the normal world, and then the closer you get to Geb, the weirder it becomes, and the
yeah.
more, like.
I referenced Heart of Darkness so many times in the campaign, and it was actually a hazard and an item. And it's just like, oh god, the developers were
Oh, that's
thinking the
cool.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. It definitely feels that way, right? Because the Ghost King here is Kurtz. The closer you get to the Ghost King, the
Mm.
closer you get to like the center of the insanity. And I definitely, I can't wait. I mean, it's way out now, but like
Oh
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
wait for chapter 4 and meeting the Ghost King in person. And like, that's I just know I'm gonna ham it up and have a lot of fun with that character.
Yeah.
So
We
we're not there yet, even in the actual game, and we're not there yet in the story on the channel, and we're not
oh
there in the game yet either. So, but and again, because I a lot of what the players do informs the choices I make. It could be that we get to that part of the story, and my perspective has changed on how I want to portray him, right?
oh yeah,
Just
yeah.
because of like what I need to do story wise. So we'll see. We'll see what. And so I don't. I play it more fast and loose than you might think. I have a
Mhm.
sense of the story structure, but then when we get into the sessions, I just let's kind of let the story shape itself and see where it goes.
So that actually leads into another one of my questions. What sort of important story markers or notes or character development actually shapes the story for you? What's important enough for you to actually write down and say, yes, this is part of the canon now. We're going to build on this in particular?
It always starts with the player characters for me, right? So, War for the Crown, one player character that his father was murdered by Pytherius. I had one player character who was cursed with terrible rage and didn't know the origins of that rage. And I had one player character from Numeria, which I was not expecting. And Marius, being a tavern keep and sort of being, I think this interesting representation of the common Taldan, right?
Mhm.
So once I had the initial four, Rankle came a little bit later, and like you can almost see that I struggled to find like the right sort of story elements to give Rankle an arc, and also it didn't help that Rankle was absent for a season. But if I look at the original four, I knew that I wanted to get to all of their backstory over the course of the game, and I feel like I did that fairly well. So I found once I have the original four, I found various points in the story where we could go deep in the backstory. So when we were going north, I knew I was going to deal with Demi. When we were going south, I knew I was going to deal with the others. And also, I decided at that point, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the orcs from the White March Prefecture were there? And so Marius got to meet his cousin, and there was that became like a whole thing. So that again, we're way off the beaten track in terms of what's written in the AP, but that's all stuff that I added because essentially the players really added it, right? The players gave
Mhm.
me a backstory, and then I pulled from it to embellish the story and make it more personal.
It is really great when things like that happen. I'm trying to do that right now in Horizons of the Vast. They like certain things and then they don't. It's very easy to see when a player likes something.
That too. I mean, I would say, how much do I change the story based on what they're enjoying? I would say I change the story more based on the decisions they're making in game. And I don't always necessarily give people what they think they want, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I sometimes will zig when they think I'm going to zag because I like the reaction that I'll get from them, and sometimes the like shocking and like I don't have a good example of from War for the Crown, but sometimes I suppose the closest thing, although that's scripted, is the death of Princess Utopia, where I
Mhm.
think there was a moment of like, oh, is Mythkeeper doing some crazy thing to us now that wasn't in the books, and now she's actually dead? Like, I could see that my players were prepared for that being a possibility, that I would just go completely off script.
Yep, that was a total dev thing. That was a like, well, why did we do the last 5 books?
Yeah, exactly.
I've had moments like that as well, where they felt like a subordinate was going to be with them forever as their administration, and she decided to hold an election and declare them all incompetent and try to take power for herself. And they,
Yeah, I did a thing in Hell's Rebels where there's a moment in the story where they go to Vire, and obviously Hell's Rebels, your the whole concept of that game is there's an evil, oppressive leader, Bars Lythrun,
Mhm.
of the
Who loves his
province,
sister.
the very messed up guy,
Yeah,
but it's an oppressive society, and so they have a base underground. They acquire it in the first or second book. They have a base underground. I think in the third book they go to Vire and they have some adventures over there. And there's a character that has like a sending spell, and she basically threatens to like alert the authorities of their base if they kill her. So that's like her get out of jail free card. She's like, release me or I'll do the sending thing.
yeah.
And my players were just like, yeah. They just tried to like stab her real quick. And so
Okay.
and so
Oh my god.
it's the Were Rat lady. If anybody has played
Mhm.
that adventure, and so I just decided that the sending went through, and so by the time they get back home, like all their friends are dead. Like, I just had the Barzillai through and kill. Not everybody. Some people managed to get out in time, but they built a lot of allies, and so many of them were dead. And it was a very like Red Wedding kind of moment, and everybody was like really dour for like 2 sessions afterwards. And but sometimes, even though that's a bummer, I also think, when later in the game when he gets his comeuppance, it's all the more satisfying because you've done that. You know what I mean?
Yes,
So
yes, I do.
yeah.
The payoff, the build up and the payoff. It's a good balance, especially when they're on board for it. So, in terms of how do you build a villain? Like with the pre-constructed villains and whatnot. I'm not going to give anything away in Bloodlords, so we can use Pytherius as an example if you like. Uh,
Yeah, let's do that. You know, well, here's what I can give away about Bloodlords, which I don't think is a particular spoiler. But in the first 3 books, there's one villain, and in the second 3 books, there's another villain. We know that Kepgeda is the daughter of a hag. That hag is kind of the villain of the first 3 books, but
mhm.
she's working for someone, and that's the villain of the second 3 books. So that's a classic, I think, Paizo structure, right? In Carrion Crown, there's a guy named Oren Brood is the villain of the first 3 books. He's like your main Whispering Way guy that you're hunting, and then in the last 3 books, it's a different villain that his like full plan comes into picture. I think it's a Divian Adrescent, the noble guy that's like got his plan to do his thing. And in War for the Crown, we have 2 villains again. Maximar Pytherius and Panavar Lothid are very different kinds of villains. They tried to do the same thing in War for the Crown, which is the first 3 books is Pytherius, and then the second 3 books is Panavar Lothid. But when I did my version, I sort of like, you know, I mixed it up a little bit more. So the way it kind of worked in my version is book 1, they start from the jump knowing that Pytherius is a bad guy, and that was partly because Aurelius's father had been killed by Pytherius, so they knew that he was not on the level, and um, he immediately appeared as kind of a sinister figure, even from the gala. And so Pytherius is kind of the villain in book 1. In book 2, Pytherius still feels like the villain for most of it, but by the end of it, you learn about Panavar Lothid. So you've got this kind of thing where you're flipping between the villains. So we did book 1, sort of Pytherius, book 2, Panavar, Book 3, we're back to Pytherius. There's a whole thing with the army and the caravanserai, and Pytherius is coming. And then book 4, in my version, they go to the Outer Planes. We're dealing with Panevar Lothid again. Book 5, we're back to Pytherius. And book 6, in a weird kind of way, is Panevar Lothid again, or the ghost of him, kind of I don't want to spoil the ending of that for just in case anybody hasn't seen it. But
Oh yeah, yeah. And I know what you cut out from that as well.
That was kind of my strategy, was like, instead of doing it, and Bloodlords, just transparently, I'm going to go straight. It's just going to be a bit like scripted. You got the main villain for the first section and a different villain for the second section, and I think that'll work out fine. But for War for the Crown, I liked threading the two villains throughout a little bit better. So you got a little bit of a flavor of one, and then a little bit of a flavor of the other, and then back to the one. And I think if you can pull that off, it's really cool. It's quite hard to build up villains. I think it's a real challenge for GMs. And in fact, if I look back at War for the Crown, and I'm critical of my own choices, I would say there were at least 2 chances to have a conversation with Pytherius that I didn't take advantage of. I think there was probably an opportunity at the Caravanserai to have a conversation with Pytherius. And there was probably a chance right before the Battle of Maheddo Fields to have Pytherius come out and like parlay, and then for them to come out, like old-timey warriors used to do, where they would like have a conversation and then they go back to their respective battle lines to fight.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been cool. But I also know that my players aren't to be trusted, and if I had Pytherius approach the players in any context after the gala, that they would just kill him or try to kill him. And I sort of was like, and that's part of the reason why I hesitated. But there was probably a way to construct it to give him a little more airtime, because most of the time he was behind his army. And the most information we get about Pytherius is really in the 5th chapter, when you get Aurelius discovering that he murdered his
teacher.
His teacher. And also you learn about Aurelius's father and all this kind of stuff. And so you get stories about him, but you don't get a lot of him personally in the story. So we'll see if I get a chance to redress that a little bit in Bloodlords. I don't know. We'll see. It's hard. It's a real challenge.
I hope so. With Iron Tavia, I took some liberties, because you get to compare her to another villain in sort of like her finale. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, there are some dramatic differences between those 2 women that the players will go like, oh wow, who's the worst? Who's the threat?
I suspect that my Iron Tavia stuff will be very different from other people's Iron Tavia stuff. Yeah. I've already played through book 3, so I know where that's going. So I'm just not. No comment.
Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.
So something very impressive that you did, that I took with me into Spore Wars, that I showed you and everything, that I think I shared the template and stuff. You seem to really like it, was your idea of having Magic the Gathering cards for like the opener or the gala, where all the new NPCs, especially for poor Palin, he had no idea what Multhun or Nirmathas was or anything, or what all these countries were. I handed him like 13 hours of your videos, and he's going like, why do I need to know all this just to play the game? It's just like, this is only for 1 chapter. This is BS. So what sort of resources, online or offline, do you find that inspire you and your players to help stay focused with the game material, and no fair saying your own videos?
I've told this story before, but the reason that I started the channel was because there weren't any resources, to be honest, that were easily digestible and yet comprehensive, right? So, what I would say though is that most of my players, I don't know if I should admit this, most of my players don't watch my videos. I think they selectively watch some videos, right?
I showed them the hour-long video for even one of your things, and it's just like, can you do it in 15 minutes? And it's just like, no.
I mean, there's I think there are some people online. King Ugatron, is that the guy that does like the 5 minutes or less videos that do short form content? And um,
Oh yeah, the
I
paper craft.
yeah, I think that's really cool. It's just it wasn't what I needed for my purposes. I just wanted like all the information. I wanted
Mhm,
all the information in one place. And I'm a bit of an auditory learner, so I thought, well, I'll just make the videos really happy that people are watching them and getting value out of them. But I think most people that watch my videos, I could be wrong, but I think most people that watch my videos are GMs and that they're rewatching a lot to like get the nuance and some of the detail. And so
mhm,
the as much detail as I can provide, the better generally for my format. But for my players, most of the time, they don't know everything about Galarian. They don't need to.
yeah.
They will learn everything they need to learn by just playing with me, right?
Mhm,
Like they'll just show up, and I'll just give you an example, right? Like the player that played Diana, he was like, I want to play a monk, and but I don't want to play like a classic monk where he's like reserved. I want to play a monk, and he's got like some he's like a braggadocio. He's got some smarminess to him.
mhm,
And I was like, well, I love this concept already. This is great. I've never heard anybody want to play this character before. Typically monks are like austere and like reserved, and he's like this guy with swagger and like and so I was immediately like, well, the traditional monk deity is Irori. I don't know if that's fitting for you. Obviously he doesn't know who Irori is. This was his first Pathfinder. No, it wasn't his first Pathfinder game. He played in one other game before he joined mine. But he wasn't super familiar with the setting. But he was like, I think Aurora is fine. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have him from a noble family. And then we just talked about sort of the regions of Taldor. And ultimately, I placed him in Salford Prefecture because that's where Pytherius is from. And I liked the idea that he and Aurelius were childhood friends because it immediately created some connective tissue. So, but during character creation, players will just ask me stuff. Now, conversely, Demi was created specifically because of my videos. So that player had watched the Numeria video, and she was like, "This is great. I want to play an android."
mhm. They have been immensely helpful to me as well, not only with prep, but just in general to learn. Okay, one more thing I wanted to touch on, especially when it comes to session prep, is what are your boundaries when it comes to specifically combat? Because I see that you like to stagger fights. That was a good one with the fight with the ghouls at the water house and whatnot, the pump
Yeah.
house. What how badly do you want to kill your players? Like where is the line exactly where it's just like you want battle, I'll give you battle, and it's just like today's a story session.
I I don't know who said this. Somebody put this in my comments, and I really like it. I don't necessarily want to kill my players. I want to lose convincingly. I want to hurt my players. I want my players to be scared they're going to die. But I don't necessarily most of the time want to actually kill my players. Typically, what I want to do is present a challenge that seems impossible. Through clever thinking and perseverance, my players succeed against the odds. Because I think that ultimately creates the best story. You really want stuff to be the right challenge level, and it's very difficult to balance challenge because some parties are more optimized than others, and I think most
Mhm,
people just run encounters like they are in the books. Whereas I'll run the first encounter at a certain given level the way it is in the books. And if it's a cakewalk for my players, the next encounter, I'll put two extra villains in there, right?
mhm,
Or if it goes the other way, where like my players got absolutely hammered in the first encounter, the next encounter is probably going to be easier than the first one was, right? And so I do a lot of like dynamic modulation. Um, Also, because I like my encounters to be memorable, I find that I add villains a lot. to the modules.
Mhm.
Obviously, you've seen the finale. By the time this airs, I think everyone will have seen the finale of season 1 of Bloodlords. That encounter with Kepgata, I'm sure was way more difficult than most people's encounter with Kipgata. Because
Oh
I
yeah.
think most people are like, you go into the bar, you fight the two guys in the bar and the ghoul. You
Yeah.
go into the vats, you fight those people. The zombies come out, you fight those people. You go into the next room, there's some zombie hounds, you fight those people. You go into the final room, you fight Kipgata and the magic cauldron.
Yeah.
Whereas my players fought everybody all at once. The entire bar basically came out and it was staggered, right? So they didn't all come out at once. It was first it was Kip Gata and the dogs and the people and and then it was the zombie horde, and then the alchemist in the back also came out. But they basically, like every villain in the bar, essentially attacked them all at once. And that in part they did that to themselves by their particular approach of deciding that they were going to summon her to them, and then charging with the Triceratops through the grate.
I'm surprised it
But
fit.
yeah, I know. Well, technically, the it was 10 feet wide, the map, but the map is provided, so
Mhm.
there's enough room for a Triceratops. But yeah, I mean, I think I like this big gnarly, and we did have a player go down. Unfortunately, we did have a player go down. But
Mhm.
it's not that I want to kill my players. I want my players to feel challenged and to feel like they could die at any moment. The truth is, I probably won't kill them, as you've seen, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I want them to think I will.
So that leads into the next question, like with the illusion of choice and the whole like illusion of what's happening at the table and everything. Are you able to accurately predict your players and encourage them to surprise you with their choices, or do you just let the story unfold organically and it's just like, well, I have to resell them this, repackage this as what they actually want that I have prepared?
I am never able to predict my players. They constantly surprise me. The main thing that I'm always impressed by, and I don't know if it's my particular play group that I've had for the last couple of games, but they're so resourceful, and they like play Assassin's Creed the RPG a lot of times. Like
Hmm.
some play groups will like go room by room and kill everything and take all the loot because they really care about the loot. Um, my group kind of cares about the loot. I would say more often than not, they end up with more money than they have to spend. That was certainly the case in War for the Crown, and it's already kind of the case in Bloodlords, where they're like, I don't really know what I want to spend the money on. Especially like RJ, who's a kineticist and requires essentially no equipment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No armor, no weapons, nothing. And so they don't have to go into every room. I think the bank was the only example of a place where they like were basically like, well, let's steal everything we can that's not nailed to the ground. But most of the time, if they have a mission, like going after Pytherius, for example, that was a huge dungeon set piece that the module provides with a whole bunch of rooms and a whole bunch of villains, many of which we didn't see because my players they found the secret entrance, which I think you're meant to, but
Hmm.
then they went around the back of the place and they went disguised and then they used invisibility and they used silence and moved through a wall by stone shaping their way through the wall,
Hmm.
and so they managed to avoid a whole ton of fighting. And I don't know that many play groups do that as much. Maybe they do. But I have my players will cheat if they can.
Hmm.
And so most of the time, I either let them get away with it or I figure out what's the contingency that the villain has in place to circumvent this. I don't know. You just got to make it up on the spot, basically. Oh, the stone shape fails because magically treated stone or whatever.
Right. It's actually quick drying cement. It's not real stone.
Exactly.
Semantics. So I guess my last question to you is, How do you layer the story? Like taking the elements that you like and the elements that the players liked and the elements from the AP and whatever. How do you make that cake?
It's pretty fly by the seat of my pants, to be honest. It's pretty ad hoc. I think in terms of sort of big picture, as I said, I read the APs cover to cover, then I do session zero with my players. I find out what they want to play, and then I actually reread the AP, and I insert moments that I think, oh, this is an Aurelius moment, or this is a Marius moment, or this is a Demi moment, and when I get to the session on the day, I'll typically do a little more prep for that session if I want to do some character stuff. So when the group went to Avon Prefecture, and I had them stop at Broken Bridge and meet with the False Bar family. Obviously, none of that is in the adventure written, so I just had to do, so typically the session before I know I've just got like a marker for most of the period, which just says Demi stuff here, and then when I get to that's you know what I mean, and then when
Yeah.
I get to the day before, I'm like, we got to figure out Demi's whole story. Okay, and then I'll like name some NPCs and like give them some I think the three daughters was
Yeah.
essentially made up the day before or whatever, and then give them a
God,
little bit
that's
of personality.
impressive.
And
You
yeah,
took her from a capsule out of Numeria all the way to Taldor, and it's just like, well, she had a boyfriend here, and that boyfriend he had to marry, and it's just like then he died, and she was really sad, so she stayed forever, and it's just like you pulled all of that out of your ass.
yes, I
Oh
100%.
God. See, I can't do that. I can't do that. I am locked in prep where I have to do things systematically the day before. Like I can't just say, "Oh, here's stuff for this character, here's stuff for that character." I have to make sure everything fits together. And then it's the players who decide for themselves, this was my moment or this was your moment, because I like it to happen organically with them at the table, and they go like, well, I'm really into this, I'm going to engage this part of the story. Like they really come forward themselves in that sense for me.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, my players will do that as well. Like there will be stuff that I don't know my players are going to find in the story. And the like, great example of this is Raja, right? Like the party just got attacked by a dire lion. That lion is not supposed to be a character.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the conversation between Demi and Diana about naming the lion, and Diana being like, "I'm keeping it as a pet," and then
Mhm.
charm animal, and then talking to the druid and being like, "Hey, can I?" thing, and then pulling me aside and being like, I got rid of barbarian a while back. I want to take druid instead. Like all of that stuff came from the players and was definitely not something that I had. There was no marker that says Diana gets a lion here.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
completely out of the character's head. And but my games are definitely a mix of that. There's some stuff that the players find in the story, and there's some stuff that uh, almost immediately after session zero, I'm like, this is going to be really cool for this character here. So,
Yeah,
um, I know that they have to go to Avon Prefecture. I know that Broken Bridge is on the way. And so that's very close to where Demi's family is from. So I like put a marker that I'm going to do some Demi stuff here, whatever
yeah,
that's going to end up being. And I did that throughout the adventure where I would have like placeholders for like cool character stuff. Um, and also, I would generally, my players are pretty much like open to me um, just establishing canonical stuff about their characters. I know that sometimes, and I haven't really experienced it that much myself, but I know that sometimes people are very protective of their characters and they have
oh
like
yes.
reams of backstory that they've written themselves. That tends not to be the case for my players. Like Demi had a loose backstory. She was in Numeria. She escaped the Technic League. She went to Taldor. But the detail, like, the first false bar that she had a relationship sort of with, and the committing to take care of his children and all that stuff, like all of that stuff was storytelling that came out in the course of the adventure that I basically kind of foisted on her, because I had done some thinking. I do my best thinking in the shower. I'll be like, a couple days before the the session, I'll be in the shower and I'll be like, ooh, what if it was Breatease's grandfather and it was this, and they went to the Aslan ruins, which makes sense because Demi knows all about Aslan and there's a connection there. And so,
Yeah.
like, I don't think my player necessarily had all those details totally mapped out, but it sort of didn't matter. And same thing goes for Aurelius and his father. There was some, Aurelius left some mystery there, and I could then fill in the gaps, which is fun for me to do as a storyteller.
Mhm, mhm. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. That was incredibly informative.
Awesome. Thank you, Bramble. I appreciate it. Can't wait to see this. Let's try this again soon.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my very first GM discussion. You can find at BrambleBearDM at his YouTube channel. The link is provided in the description below. I also, at some point, Bramble asked me for useful tools, and I feel remiss if I don't also mention all the incredible work that the folks at Pathfinder Wiki are doing. The Pathfinder Wiki is indispensable, and these videos would be almost impossible to put together if it wasn't for Pathfinder Wiki and how well referenced Pathfinder Wiki is, because it allows me then to track down the books that talk about specific things and go to the original source material. So that's an incredibly useful thing. Link in the description below, although I think anybody watching this video is already familiar with the wiki. That's all I got for you. See you soon for another GM's Corner.